Hello, welcome to another video. This time it's part 2 of Claymore. Check out part 1 if you missed it. When we last left off, Teresa just whacked a load of her own kind and wanders through the wider world with Clare. Claymore's Sophia and Noelle encounter a town composed entirely of Yoma and compete for who can slay more, proving that they are both qualified to be ranks 3 and 4 amongst their organization. Before the rivals can get immersed in a personal brawl, rank 2, the flash sword Irene, stops them by exploding a couple Yoma with her aura alone. Anyway, this town clearly isn't big enough for all 3, which means there is some other goal in mind. Ipeen elucidates, stating that the organization grouped them here to form a hit squad. Their target is Teresa of the Faint Smile. It's not ideal that the strongest Claymore should go rogue, but numbers 2 through 5 should be enough. Where's number 5? Irene explains how everyone present is actually one rank lower. There's new blood in the organization who rose to rank 2 in a month. The others are shook and doubt. Here she is, clumsy as she is, Priscilla. Noelle doubts harder and tries to settle things by force. Priscilla has a mental breakdown, apologizing for being late. It took her a while to slay every other Yoma in town. Maybe the new girl is actually pretty strong, so strong that much like Teresa, she's never released her Yoma powers. Irene explains how normally she'd never want to cross blades with Teresa, but with Priscilla, things might be different. Speaking of which, Teresa and Clare are back at it again, roving travelers who save passing villages from Yoma. Free Pizza was hoping they could lay low for a while, but with Chair's approval, reluctantly dispatches the booger. The vibe of killing Yoma hits differently now that Teresa has obtained freedom, and she declines payment for the first time, opting for room and board for the night. Cookware is elated. Later, she comments on how surprised Teresa looked after seeing the faces of those she saved, then immediately falls asleep on her. While she rests, Transistor senses 3 Claymores entering town, assuming the worst, and suppressing her aura further. This is likely futile, and sure enough, Irene waltzes right into the inn, dropping off an enormous sack to pay for the upcoming damages. The Claymores meet and clash with a heated exchange. Irene's imperceptible flash sword is halted by Teresa and her berating. Joel and Soper attempt to attack from stealth, but fail to do anything more than destroy the hotel. Suddenly, another one. Priscilla introduces herself, deviating from the plan of attacking from behind. This is probably ill-advised, but an interesting move nonetheless. Teresa tells Clare to stand back, then engages in conversation, receiving a question of why she didn't die at her scheduled execution, and a scolding on the killing of humans. If Claymores are allowed to kill, then the valuable trust the organization built with humans topples. Her justification of the organization's logic feels especially shallow in comparison to Teresa's learned experience, however. Transatlantic Visa responds by essentially stating that the world is not so cleanly cut to rely solely on the organization's rules for stability. She also calls Priscilla a naive idiot. They clash. Pissy's blade is both quick and powerful, able to slice an entire house in half and make Teresa expend a few breaths. The other Claymores observe from a distance, fascinated with the fight. Irene takes the opportunity to explain how Teresa's powers work. She's pretty good at sensing the yoki, or Yoma flow, and everything. The best, actually. Because of this, Priscilla's complete repression of yoki theoretically should cancel out Teresa's keen senses. The entire scene vibrates with fervor as the battle rages on, but Teresa's ability doesn't just lie in her innate power, but her incredible skill as a warrior. Priscilla is confused by this, believing ardently that Teresa should be inferior due to her perceived villainy. Meanwhile, Teresa is calmly analyzing the situation and decides that killing the girl is best. Irene thankfully has impeccable timing and saves her. Noelle and Sopapilla get involved too, but don't stand much of a chance. With Teresa surrounded, Irene reiterates their objective, not to test their skills or fight fairly, but to execute a criminal, and to do so with the highest certainty of success. They begin to throb, activating their Yoma powers, which they really should have done from the start. Priscilla apologizes, then explodes. Clark is startled by this development. Teresa defends against the juiced Claymores, who despite being absurdly strong, slowly begin to take damage. Priscilla loses focus after seeing Irene fall, but is sent back into battle. Irene suddenly realizes that she underestimated Teresa again, seeing that she hasn't even released her Yoma powers yet. fast. After the scuffles end, Teresa sends Clare away to get their stuff, while she goes to execute Priscilla, the only real threat to her continued survival. The other three reflect on this terrible fate, as Priscilla trembles in fear. Teresa can't bring herself to go through with the deed, however. She berates herself for becoming so soft, tells the warriors to come at her whenever, apologizes to the villagers, then pieces out. Iodine is shocked that Teresa actually showed mercy, and goes to inspire the rookie, who is currently embroiled in a mental breakdown. Priscilla goes nuts off her yoki and darts off to fight again, unknowing of her limits. She doesn't look too great at the moment. Teresa warns Priscilla not to go more than 80% Yoma, but she does anyway, throbbing all her armor off. This absurd transformation bestows Priscilla a nasty mega arm that she can wriggle around. In the process of her ongoing psychotic episode, Priscilla begins to lose control over her mind, confusing the past with the present. Teresa figures she should get serious and turns on her eyeballs. 3, 4, and 5 watch on from the sidelines, thankful that they're not part of the fight. They are fearful that Priscilla has gone past the return threshold, but they should be worrying whether she'll come back at all after Teresa's done. Irene is in awe of Teresa's power. Having essentially defeated Prince, Teresa warns her to restrain herself, but Priscilla is lost in her crisis and cannot. Going past the point of no return and throbbing uncontrollably, Irene is shook. Priscilla begs to be saved, unaware that she can no longer be. Teresa informs her of this. Everyone is shook. Priscilla begs to be killed instead, and so Teresa agrees. Suddenly, she no longer has hands or a head. Everyone is shook. Again, Priscilla awakens fully into some kind of disgusting Yoma god. She is brought to absolute elation by the metamorphosis, states as much, then proceeds to yearn for some succulent guts. Irene attacks, but her arm is teleported off. Here it is. Noelle and Sophia are killed instantly, and Irene follows. Clare is left startled as Priscilla strides past to look for a more savory meal. Now what? Clare gingerly picks up the severed head of Teresa, cradling it in her arms, which is probably the only reasonable thing to do in this situation. Clare finds herself running through the town with Teresa's dome, in search of the neighborhood watch, of whom she petitions to infuse the corpse with herself. I suppose this happened, and here we are, back in the present. A lady is saved from a couple of passing Claymores, who find Clare in the following town. She was meant to wait for the others in case of a voracious eater, and even let a Yoma slip past, so is scolded. Raki scolds her for being so careless. Later that night, Orsay also scolds her, but he is aware that Clare has certain ambitions, and warns her that the voracious eater she fought in the cathedral wasn't fully developed yet. The full thing is more like an awakened being, much like Priscilla. Cher begins to walk away, unenthused by this old information, but Orsay plainly states that she should give up on taking Priscilla's head. Nothing fathomable could have killed Teresa of the faint smile, so the organization figured they'd leave the case cold. As long as the awakened Priscilla doesn't earn a bounty, the organization won't make moves. However, should she need to be killed, Orsay states that they'll weigh the entire organization's power level with hers, and the elders will decide. Either way, their current top 2 Claymores are quite strong, and he teases Clare about not being one of them. Despite this, he specifically added Pear to a team of awakened being specialists who are about to go on another hunt. Clare touches Raki briefly and tries to feel Teresa's essence from within herself. Later, the kid is concerned about the mission, and the cloaked figure ushers them to the rest of the team. This lady teases Clare about Raki. She doesn't take kindly to this, so has to be stopped by a third party, who is peeved that they had to wait a week for Clare to arrive. The leader, Miria, calms things down and gives them the scoop on the situation. They introduce each other, starting with Miria, number 6, who has killed 7 voracious eaters, Helen, number 22, who has killed none, Deneve, number 15, who has killed 2, and Clare, number 47, who has killed none. The others are startled to find that Clare is so low ranked, the lowest possible actually. Raki feels sorrow with this, reflecting on how gallant she is, despite being theoretically so weak. Anyway, she gives him some currency noodles for several months worth of living expenses, then says she'll be back in a week. Saki isn't so sure and is slain for being a doubter. The rain salutes their departure into the mountains. Clare is teased again briefly, but Murderia scolds Helen for being rude. Melon just doesn't like that they were assigned such a pathetic team member. They find a nice cave to hole up, and Helen goes to get a snack snack, while Miria takes Clare aside to test her abilities. The ranking part doesn't really bother her so much as the fact that Clare has this insane godlike aura. They clash, but Chair isn't particularly outstanding, just as expected. The others are pretty sure that Clare is useless to them. She passes out immediately and lays there in a puddle, conjuring sweet dreams of Teresa's magnificent form. The next day, they move out, insisting that Clare just watch. Later, some guy casually approaches them in a ravine and is attacked. Miria was too slow, however, and gets her corn creamed. She states urgently that the organization's information was wrong this time, and their foe is actually more than they can deal with. Felon is more shocked to find that the awakened being is male. Meanwhile, a Claymore named Galetta is directed towards the distant mountain. Deneve is immediately obliterated by the Yoma's malevolent tonguing and falls lifelessly into a ravine. Next, Helen darts around at Miria's behest until Clare gets her cookies crumbled. Helen wriggles her arm around in gum-gum mode for a light stint, giving Deneve the opportunity to get back into action with her supercharged regeneration. Miria reflects on her subordinate's excellent abilities as Clare emerges from some rubble. The battle continues on as the distant elderly ninja explains how the organization used to create male warriors. They were somewhat of a failure and discontinued. The strength of the warriors wasn't the problem, it was the rate of Yoma transformation. The males generally couldn't fight the absolute ecstasy promised by metamorphosis, and easily turned into voracious eaters. The awakened being under fire points out one particularly interesting inconsistency in the story: the fact that specifically the 4 of them were sent to deal with him. This startles Algeria, who seems to have noticed that her homies have awakened in some aspect. The mysterious Claymore senses their apprehension and wishes to get closer, but is denied. Anyway, the scaly Yoma decides it's time and viscerally dissects all the plebs without so much as a stutter. Miria is tormented a little bit by his praise and art piece. Meanwhile, Raki stares longingly into the sunset, is given a pleasant meal, then regrettably is told that most Claymores who head into the mountains never come back. Miria quickly sweeps Deneve to the side, peeps at Clare, then collects everyone together. None of them are fit for fighting, but the phantom Miria sure can be. The Yoma outs her technique for going fast, eager to test it firsthand. So does, taking a few nasty wounds. Clare discusses Miria's techniques and the Yoma's tactics, revealing the state of the battle as being in breathless contention. Helen is peeved that Clare is able to discern so much, and Miria is trapped underneath the Yoma's big grippers. His nasty tongue wriggles all over, then digs into Miria's guts. Helen finds herself unable to act and enters her era of true despair. This prompts Clare to emerge, stating that true despair is much deeper. Her wounds have recovered already, much to everyone's shock. Clare approaches calmly, reducing her yoki down to a nubbin and sensing the flow of everything around her. This startles everyone, Diphtheria included, who reflects on her fight from earlier. Clare was trying to duel by reading yoki the whole time. Since Yoma have such powerful yogurt, Clare is essentially a walking meat grinder for awakened beings. Galetta is shocked to find that the tide of battle has shifted, and it clearly has, as Clare pulls off some slick moves to literally disarm her opponent. Unfortunately, it has never skipped neck day. Fortunately, Miria was reading the fight from the side and discovered the Yoma's fatal flaw, his lack of defense when being offensive. This seems kind of obvious, I would have thought. So Bear and Assyria tag team the lizard man to death in the next instant. Clare immediately falls unconscious, while Miria reflects on their Pyrrhic victory. Meanwhile, Rak is worried, and Glenn reports that the awakened being is slain. The ninja is shocked to find that the mission was completed so easily, and with only one potential casualty. Deneve is struggling to recover after being hit fatally, whereas Helen believes Clare should be the most out of shape. She kind of knows how to not get run through in critical spots, though. Miria confirms with the others that they all came close to awakening before, and have previously caused a bit of mischief within the organization. This presents a suspicious amount of coincidences with the situation. All of these problem children gathered together with bad information on their target. Malaria shares her story briefly. She was hunting an awakened being, found it to be an old friend, then started to awaken, provoking the ire of this battle pervert. She swore at that moment to take revenge on the organization, and hypothetically is now a target for execution. Clare asks if anything significant has changed about them, now that they have nearly awakened. It quite obviously has, and Miria states that they have probably genuinely awakened at this point. Galena cold reads their yoki from afar, finding that the Claymores are troubled by this information. Helen resists being called awakened, but Miria states that they might not be Yoma, but the extra abilities and increased battle power resembles a transcendence of sorts. Denver regains consciousness to suggest that they may be slowly entering a full awakening as they speak. Miria affirms this, and confirms that they could transform anytime. Deneve is like, dang, I want to try that. So does, spooking the others. Instead of dying slowly from blood loss, she figures she'd be better off surpassing her limits to regenerate, using all her Yoma power at once to save herself, and test a theory that they can't fully transform into Yoma anymore. The others prepare to lop her top in the event of the worst, and she awakens, startling Galetta. However, back at the mountain, Deneve yet remains. This is quite a new revelation, but still incredibly reckless. Suddenly, Clamp senses they were being watched. Galena notices and wonders how she was detected, so peers again. Finding that the awakened one has stabilized, she informs the ninja, who says she should memorize the yoki of those 4 in case they need to be killed. Miria tells her underlings to be especially careful about the organization and not to fight the top 5 under any circumstances, drawing their symbols in the cliff face with her blade. Number 1, Alicia. 2, Beth. 3, Galetta. 4, a particularly uncouth psychopath, Ophelia. And 5, Raffaella. Miria explains that they don't have any useful information about the awakening secrets as of yet, but something is clearly upsetting about the organization, so they touch blades to form an alliance. Raki greets his girl, who has returned from battle, more or less unscathed. Clare once more coats her sword in grape juice, pleasing Rock and the townsfolk. Later, Osprey inquires about Clare's noticeable improvement, and informs her that she is to hunt another awakened being. Even more later, Raki trains in swordsmanship, and is told to stay behind this time. This makes sense, but Raki disapproves. Either way, he's left behind, baguette in hand. Clare enters the city to find it a wasteland. She senses a comrade, but feels troubled. It's the psycho single-digit Ophelia, who will be her partner for the mission. She immediately wraps around Clare and begins to sniff her, stating that she smells awakened. Clare is molested further, but Raki was creeping about and intervenes. The freak decides to slurp up her own blood and comment on how beautiful it is that things bleed. Clare identifies Ophelia by her symbol and is shook. Cilia then attacks Raki, intent on killing, but is stopped before doing so. Clare berates her for attempting to slay a human. However, Ophelia clearly doesn't care and decides to mess with Clare by cutting off her legs and challenging Raki to a duel. The exception being that Ophelia will go easy at first, then ramp things up every minute. Chair is to glue herself back together and intervene before Raki is eventually dismembered, and so Ophelia's Saw-like game show begins. Raki puts up a fair fight, but realistically stands no chance at all, while Clare struggles to stick her leggies back on, despite using her Yoma powers to do so. Raki continues to be sliced up, taunting Ophelia, and taking care not to interrupt Clare's concentration. Ophelia seems to be having a great time, but is interrupted by what I can only assume is the awakened being, who wants to understandably eat Raki. The girl transforms into battle mode and attempts to destroy everything except Raki. She fails to kill the Claymores, but Clare's legs still aren't joined properly. Ophelia seizes the opportunity to feed Raki to the Yoma and pin Clare down, taking pleasure in watching both of their helpless struggles. The Yoma extends its gaping maw, while the Oppenheimer continues to taunt Clare. Raki proclaims his desire to get stronger and protect his girl, but this alone is clearly not enough. Clare awakens a second time and lightly fries the Yoma. This surprises Ophelia, who is excited to kill 2 awakened beings in one day. Clare flees with Raki in tow, while the Yoma drags Ophelia back into battle, keen on testing the Claymore's strength against her own. Ultimately, Ophelia is trapped and snapped like a glow stick. She isn't affected too greatly by a disconnected spinal cord and finishes the Yoma. Thankfully, Clare was able to obtain a practical distance from Ophelia, but senses her proximity and insists that Raki and her split up. Raki doesn't approve and just wants to be with Clare. This is on brand for him, but Clare gives him a little kissy on the lips to insist that they must survive to meet again. Raki understands this time and proceeds on his journey to attain maximum strength. Clare prays to the god Raboner to give him strength, and he exits the stage. Meanwhile, Ophelia is frothing to have a go at Clare. They engage in a brief chase scene. However, Opert is faster. After having caught Clare, she lets loose a little bit. Clare confuses her by reducing her yoki, but with the clashing of blades lets Ophelia know that she has a fair bit of skill. Ophelia suddenly releases her strongest attack, lands several clean hits with her wiggly blade, then turns her head around like a perverse owl. She coined the wicked undulation with the name Rippling Blade, then gyrates furiously. This prompts Slate to begin contemplating her chances, of which she determines that there wasn't much to begin with. She charges head on and gets Mufasa'd into a chasm. Thankfully, Clare already knew this was going to happen and made sure to play dead. Ophelia catches on pretty much instantaneously instantly though, and lectures Clare about her strategy, making sure to include an explanation of how Claymores become either offensive or defensive types, depending on what they decide to specialize in subconsciously. Offensive types like Clare can't regenerate super well, so Ophelium turns Clare's precious arm into dust. Resistance is futile at this juncture, and Claramus is carved into a Giga Cripple. Ophelia begins to prepare for the killing blow, but is suddenly interrupted by a mysterious cloaked figure. She is understandably upset by this, and attacks, finding herself incapable of landing a strike with even her most powerful move. This is meaningless against the warrior's blade. It's the flash sword Irene the White. Clare has a calculated flashback in a dream, waking a week later to find herself swaddled and mummified. Ice cream had beat the devil out of Ophelia, bringing her to within the cusp of death, and so Clare remains determined to exit the house and fight immediately. This is ill-advised, so she is stopped and scolded. Having lost her dominant arm and being so messed up, fighting is hardly possible. Irene does carpentry while recalling where she knew Clare from. After Clare downs an entire fruit basket, they discuss the past, both equally shocked that the other is still around. Clare confirms her mission of vengeance against Priscilla and is warned not to even try. Irene specifically points out that Clare isn't even half-yoma. She ate part of Teresa, so at best she is more like 1/4 yoma, just simply inferior on all levels. Irene displays her lack of arm as an example of the Claymore's powerlessness in the face of the awakened being. She gave up on fighting out of fear, but this is all the more reason for Clare to continue her ongoing battle. Teresa was everything to her. There was no beginning until Teresa, and there will be no end until Priscilla falls. Irene figures that the two of them are just built differently, and that if nothing else, Clare is qualified to fight, so decides to teach her the flash sword. Meanwhile, Ophelia is having a mental breakdown in the forest, calling out to her brother to protect her, then abruptly awakening after cursing her eviscerated sibling. Back at Irene's shack, Clare is taught how to juice one arm with a metric brickload of Yoki, and that's the end of part 2 of Claymore. Hello. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, interact with the platform by liking, commenting, or subscribing. That kind of thing helps a lot, provided the video doesn't get taken down for copyright first. Anyway, thanks again. Bye.